Meeple Nation Podcast, episode 449, Bardsung.
Welcome, citizens of Meeple Nation. For the next 30 minutes, sit back and enjoy.
Meeple Nation Podcast is sponsored by GameToppersLLC.com. By now, you've probably heard us talk quite a bit and quite often about GameToppersLLC.com. If you haven't gone to visit them at GameToppersLLC.com, you should really do that. There is some awesome stuff that they have there. Some of the greatest equipment that you can add to your game room and to your game night. The actual game toppers, to the beautiful mats that can go on a game topper or on any other surface, to the legs for the toppers and all the other accessories that seem to never end. Go and check them out. GameToppersLLC.com.
So speaking of accessories, Andy, you just got legs for your Minecraft.
Yes.
You can set up 3 different Minecrafts at the same time. One in the middle of the kids' wrestling match room.
That's where we usually set up the third Minecraft when we have like Hug a Meeple Con or something like that. But we've also set it up in our upstairs living room, which is probably where it would end up just because Wild Boys and a Minecraft don't mix very well.
And you have very wild boys at your house.
There's no doubt. You add Doug's Boys to the mix, and it's mayhem.
It's a party for
It
sure.
would definitely end up like a Buffalo Bills tailgating party with people jumping on breaking tables.
Okay.
Except I don't think that they could break the Minecraft.
Those kids, yes. If there's a will, there's a way with them.
Let's not try.
Life finds a way.
So my dining leaves are on my second Watson, and I picked up a Minecraft mat to put on top of my dining leaves. And so I got the volcano mat and put that on top of those leaves. And just the way the color pops in that, I think that is a really good mat. I really like this pirate one that's on my extra long Watson, but that volcano one, the color and the contrast between the dark and the red, the bright red, I really like that mat.
Yeah, it is a beautiful mat. What I think is probably the best, probably your best part of that whole experience of getting that mat is that the fact that you were able to get a Minecraft mat.
Not quite living up to your standards. Being able to use the word Minecraft and my stuff all in the same sentence, that's kind of nice.
Yeah, I know.
Even if I had 2 Minecrafts, I don't think they would fit in here. It would be pretty tight quarters.
It would be.
This room is nice and big, but it's a very narrow room.
You know, and it's interesting because you ended up getting the Watsons, not knowing, obviously, that you were going to move here, and the Watsons are perfect for the space that you have.
Right, yeah, I'm able to set them both up with the extra long leaf. They fill the room nicely and do allow for access and people to filter in and out. For the most part, fits the room perfectly.
And then that's the beauty part of Game Toppers with their products is whatever game space you have, a large space to something that's more narrow, they have something that will accommodate whatever you need.
And it was really good last week be in Dallas and hang out with Kevin to just spend some time. And we shared a meal together, had some great food. Kevin's just such a cool guy. I always look forward to spending time with him.
Yeah, Berkey's awesome.
Yeah, it was really great to meet Kevin. Awesome guy. Got to hang out at the booth and spend some time there. Had a really good time at BGG Con.
Welcome to Meeple Nation. We are your hosts. I am Andy Holliday.
I'm Douglas Stewart.
I'm Nathan Howard.
And I'm Dave Holliday.
So jump over to our website, check out what we've got over there. We have links to our past episodes. We also have blogs. We release a blog every week. Our bios, if you would like to know a little bit more about us and how we got into gaming, where we kind of come from, spell that out in our bios. Also, if you like what we do, we have a link to our Patreon page. We love the people that are supporting us now, and we want to continue to improve the podcast, and we would love any support that you can throw our way. And for those that continue to support us, thank you so much. If you have any comments or any questions, please email us at meeplenation@gmail.com. Also, we are on Twitter, Instagram, and our Facebook page is Meeple Nation Off Air. We would love to have you come over and leave a comment or just have some discussions about some amazing board games, the amazing board games that are out there in the industry.
This week we are discussing Bardsung. In Bardsung, you begin with a single tile and a destination. What unfolds is a branching, labyrinthine dungeon of dangerous enemies, wandering monsters, challenging puzzles, and valuable treasure. Bardsung is a game of choosing your path as you seek to inspire the bard's song and live your legend. From your physical passage through the dungeon to your journey of building your character into a fabled hero, your choices define your experience. I'm really excited to be talking about this one this week. I've only had the opportunity to play this once. I'm going to try to chime in here and there. I know, Andy, you've played this several times. Dave, Nathan, I think you guys have had the opportunity to play this at least a couple of times. I really love this idea. You start with a single tile and a destination. This map that it kind of lays out before you, you start on one side of it and you're simply trying to get to the other side. But what happens in the middle is this really cool adventure. It fits into that dungeon crawl category of game. We've played a lot of those, but I think this one has some really cool and unique features that make it a real standout in that genre. I had a blast playing this game.
I've only played it a couple of times as well, but I've really enjoyed it. Brian Hirschbach came and walked us through the first couple of tutorial missions. I walked away from that going, I could see this one climbing my list of top games. I always love character development and the ability to personalize your character and just to be involved in choosing what skills he obtains. So far, I am still very optimistic for all this.
The way you begin the game, everyone needs to pick a hero. There are quite a few heroes to choose from that have wide range of abilities. I think that's one thing that drew me to this game back on Kickstarter was the fact that it was a dungeon crawler. But I love when there's a wide variety of heroes to choose from and you don't have a lot of the vanilla heroes. They are all very unique on how they play. They did a great job with this, how interesting each of the characters are.
Absolutely. There are fewer things more enjoyable than starting one of these dungeon crawl type games and having somebody say, okay, go ahead and pick your character, and they hand you a whole stack of cards to look at. What is it about that that's so fun? I love that. And this does not disappoint in that aspect. There is a whole bunch of heroes to choose from, and they're all really interesting. Kind of a hard choice to make right out of the gate.
You know, you kind of have a class that your character will fall into. This is one of the things I really liked is you're not bound into the skills of that particular class. You have your starting skills that you're going to get at the beginning of the game. The game does a great job with the tutorials. It reminded me a lot of Jaws of the Lion that steps you through the game, kind of learn as you go. And I thought that was great. So, you know, the first tutorial, you're going to learn combat. The next tutorial, you're going to learn more about exploration and how the rest of the game plays. And then finally, they give you the rest of the meat of it by that third play. I think they did a great job as far as teaching the game that way, especially when it can be a little overwhelming with all the characters and all the cards and all the pieces. And it can seem more daunting than it really is. Like you said, Doug, you get all these ability cards along with the hero cards that are handed to you, and you're looking at these. There's so much customization available. And like I said, you can go into skills of other classes. It just costs you a little bit more experience when you gain that experience for it. Really, the sky's the limit on how you want to develop your character. It can be different every single time, which I absolutely love. Descent 2nd Edition is my favorite board game of all time, and this, as far as the customization of characters, blows it out of the water.
For a simple game, I mean, you have some cards, you have some items, and to have that variability, that opportunity to customize your character so much is great. Doug, you said you like to go through that big stack of cards and to digest them all and try to pick one. And for me, I'm kind of completely opposite. Pass me the big stack of cards, I'm going to take whatever's on top. I don't have any experience with the game. But then the next time I play that game, there's more research. What did I really like about the character I played last time? What is something new that I want to try? This game provides a lot of that. Even if you played the same character again, you can take that character a very different direction, be able to focus and build up differently, to have a different gaming experience, a different gaming feel than you did before. That, I think, is awesome.
Nathan, you pointed out, we kind of blew past what you just pointed out, but you pointed out for a simple game, you said, right?
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't call it a simple game.
Well, no, I think it is. I think the gameplay is really simple. It's really easy to catch on and how to do different things and what you can do on your turn. And I think they blended that so well with all of the content and all of the different, we keep saying customization, all of the ways in which you can do those things. It really is a simple game, though, when it comes down to it.
I think you're right. I didn't get to join you for those tutorial missions, but when I sat down and played, the rules teach part was 5 minutes, maybe 10 at the very most, and we were off to the races. It is, I think, conceptually a fairly easy game to get down and play. Now, once we actually get into the nuts and bolts of how it plays, it offers, I think, a really rich experience. This is not something that's just going to be rolling through a few rooms, chucking a few dice, killing a few monsters, and we're done. There's a lot more going on here than just that. It's simple enough that you don't have to delve into a big, long rules explanation or spend a lot of time with new players to get them into the game quick. To me, that's a big deal.
When you're bogging down with rules, even though it's at the beginning of the game, and we've talked about this on previous podcasts where read rules or add rules in the middle of the game can kill a game. But honestly, even a really long rules explanation where you're making these players drink through the proverbial fire hose, it can be overwhelming. And honestly, it seems to me, at least in my experience, if you have an overly complicated game like that, many times it's just easier to play a few rounds and at least get people's feet wet and then just say, okay, do you want to keep going or do you want to start over at this point now that you know how to play? I know talking to my wife, that's what she actually prefers. She's like, let's just play a few rounds and then we can start over so I can understand how the game's played.
I think I prefer that as well, because there's so much that when you're sitting there trying to explain, I think you nailed it with the analogy of the fire hose, because often you're getting that download of all these rules, this, by step 5. I'm getting every other thing. It's just not making sense. But whereas you use also the example of Jaws of the Lion, which does that phenomenally, I feel. As I played that with my wife, the setup of going through the rules progression as each scenario introduced and expanded on that rule set. Like Doug, I didn't play the tutorials with Brian, but did have the opportunity to play the game. We played a couple of scenarios. Is that going into it and getting started? And then once we get started, yeah, just like you said, Doug, once you get going, it's really easy to get. When I said that it was more of a beefier game, if you're taking it all at once, yeah, it is. But if you can do the learning process as more of an exploration, you start with a base and grow on that, the game becomes far more digestible.
As far as complexity goes for Bardsung, where it becomes more complex is in the iconography. There is a ton of iconography in this. Hopefully in the next printing it's a little bit better, but it's printed really, really small. And on the cards, the icons are really small. For old eyes, or maybe even young eyes, I don't know, it's kind of hard to read those. Like I said, there's a lot of iconography. So trying to figure out exactly what things do, there's a lot of referring to the rules. What does that mean again? The more we played, obviously, the more familiar we are, and it won't be such a big deal. But at least for the first bit, there was a lot of referencing rules just to figure out what the icons mean.
That said, though, once you learn what the icons are, like the ones that are on your character card, you just have to go over them once, and you do have to look up and learn a few. Then you're off to the races for the rest of the mission. So it doesn't force you to sort of slow down as you're playing, as you're in the meat of the game, to reference rules and look up icons as you go. I think it's kind of an upfront thing. You have a learning curve a little bit up front, and then you're just hit the ground running.
I wish I had a young mind like Doug, and I only had to read it once instead of reference it over and over again.
Yeah, I had to go back to the rule book several times too. But to Doug's point, when you're playing, you're usually only playing with the limited card set. When that would bog down and everybody's like, okay, what are the rules? Or what does this icon mean? It was when we were leveling up, getting new cards and saying, okay, what are my next options? And then, like you, Andy, that's where I was like, okay, I need the rules again. I don't remember what this icon does. I don't remember what this does.
If everybody's going through and excited about leveling up their character, then that downtime isn't as big of a deal.
Absolutely.
Like we said before, there are a lot of cards to go through. So if you're trying to level up your character and pick an ability, and all of those have different icons on them, that can take some time. If everybody's doing the same thing, obviously you're going to have to pass the rulebook around, get photocopies of that part of the rulebook so everybody can have access to it. I mean, it takes some time. At least for me, it didn't feel like our downtime in between the two sessions that we played. No one was really pulling out their phones or anything like that. Everybody was fairly well involved in trying to get their character leveled up and figure out what they wanted to do, and then we were ready to go back in and delve into the next scenario.
Yeah, I think in any campaign game like this where your character is going to develop, that stage of upgrading your character, I don't think very many people consider that downtime part of the experience. For us, that's maybe one of the highlights.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it speaks very highly of a game when everyone at the table is excited about the level up process, because that is definitely not the case with all games. It is the case with this one. This one was fun.
I totally agree. Compare it to games like Shadows of Brimstone, where I also get excited about upgrading my character.
It seems to me, comparing Bardsung to other dungeon crawlers, like we've talked about, we've only played a couple of times, but it seems like you're gaining experience faster in Bardsung than a lot of others, where you're gaining abilities, actually customizing your character more quickly. For me anyway, it makes the game more interesting, more exciting. Okay, I got this new ability. Let's go back and do another scenario. I want to try it out. Versus a lot of others where it takes sometimes several sessions to level up your hero, depending on the scenario. You mentioned Shadows of Brimstone, Nathan, and I love Shadows of Brimstone. I think it's a little light on story. So if you're just diving into the next scenario, the scenarios are fairly blah sometimes, and there's not a lot of flavor. The gameplay is amazing. The monsters are amazing. There's so many things I love about Shadows of Brimstone, but it takes a long time to level up your hero, where this doesn't have that same feel. There's a lot more excitement and a lot more opportunities to customize, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, I would compare Shadows of Brimstone more with Diablo video game, where it's just a hack and slash.
Yeah.
Boom, 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 you're going through it. Where Bardsung is more of a campaign driven. It's more story driven. You bring up the progress and stretching out the time to leveling up. For me, we just played Pathfinder this last weekend. We get to that point where we leveled up. Great. I'm excited. Look up some new stuff, do some new stuff. But the 3 other weeks that we played, we're still at the same level. I enjoy the level up process. I enjoy doing what I can. And so I'm more of let's progress, and I want to get my character to their apex performance. Maybe part of my slog of role-playing games is that we don't level up fast enough.
I agree with you, Nathan. You level up, you're excited to play that next session, maybe the next one after that, but at that point you're ready for another level up.
Yeah, and some people love that. I'm not trying to take that away from people. Some people love that long story, that long progression, that investment in their character. I'm just not that person.
I totally understand.
And I'm that way even with games that I enjoy. Brad and Spencer and I are making our way through a campaign of Lord of the Rings Journeys in Middle-earth. We have had to play through 3 or 4 of the scenarios before we've even started leveling up any of our gear and abilities. I love Journeys in Middle-earth, but that progression is just so slow and it starts to feel like such a slog. That was something that I loved. The night that I came over and we played 2 missions, got a little bit of XP to start with, got some stuff leveled up. We played through one of them. Got some XP, got to level up some stuff, played through a second one, got some XP, leveled up some stuff. That just feels satisfying. It feels so good. I love that fast-paced character leveling up and customization.
Let's talk a little bit about the characters. You brought up at the very beginning of the game, everybody selects a character. Your character card will tell you, going to tell you your starting abilities. Everybody's going to start with 3 abilities. It's also going to tell you your starting equipment. Everybody has 2 pieces of equipment. Will also tell you which skills or which attributes are going to be upgraded. We've talked a little bit about role-playing that already. Just like any role-playing game, each character has 6 base attributes. You've got your strength, your dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Each character is going to have 2 of those that are leveled up a little bit. So one's going to get a +1 and one's going to get a +2. Those attributes are going to pertain to certain skill tests or certain attacks throughout gameplay. So that +2 or that +1 can come in really beneficial. You're also going to have a plastic tray that holds your key components. You can put your abilities and your weapons right there on that tray to keep everything together. Bonuses to attributes are one of the things that's going to make a difference between each character. The other differences are going to be possibly in their movement or their range, what kind of die you roll when you hit a creature to determine how many wounds you're going to cause, whether or not you have an armor benefit, and then your life. One of the main features of this game is there's a thing called fate that you're going to be using throughout the game. Party as a group, depending on the number of heroes in the party, will have down at the bottom of the map a bunch of tokens that are your fate tokens. One side is dark, one side is light. When they're on the light side, they're available to use, and they will trigger certain attacks, certain abilities you can't even use unless you spend fate. So if there's no fate to spend, you don't get to do your really cool stuff. And each character has a special ability that is unique to that character that is a way of replenishing the fate that is available to the party. For example, Fire Soul, that's one of the characters that I played. She's a spellcaster. Whenever she inflicts burn on an enemy with one of her attacks, she replenishes 1 fate. Each character has something similar that's unique to that character, a way of replenishing fate so that you can hopefully manage your fate well in order to continue to fuel those really good abilities.
One thing to mention about fate as well is anyone can spend a fate to add a d4 to their attack roll or to the roll that they're doing. Whenever you make a roll that's not a damage roll, you're going to roll a d20. You can spend a fate token to add a d4, and you're just going to add whatever value that d4 shows to your d20, along with whatever attribute bonus you have for that particular test you're performing. I know, Dave, that in our first playthrough, you used that all the time.
All the time. For whatever reason, I had to. Rolling low. I kept missing even when I was using that. No, that came in very, very handy. But I was also the fire soul. I knew that if I inflicted burn, which was very easy for her to do, that it would replenish. It doesn't hurt for me to do that.
Between the 4 characters that we were playing amongst all of us, 3 of us, myself excluded in that, were extremely good at replenishing the fate, whereas the character I was playing was not super great at it. My ability didn't trigger it quite as often, and I had to take damage in order for that to happen. Brian, yours, and Logan's all replenished the fate very quickly. The fact that you were using that ability and replenishing the fate so easily, it was kind of a no-brainer for you to do anyway. It was great.
Right.
I really like that fate is a communal resource, something that the players kind of have to work together on spending it for big bursts and then discuss at the table who's going to try to replenish that. Can we gain this back if we spend it? Naturally, you're going to have some players that are going to need to spend more of it in order to carry out their abilities. And then other characters don't need it as much, but are good at generating it. It's a fun way of making the players at the table work together to fight their way through the dungeon.
I like how that not necessarily forces co-op in the game, but as a group, you have to have that discussion of using that fate and when it's applicable. For my character, I didn't use the fate at all. And I didn't have any way to replenish the fate unless I rolled the 20 or the 1, but which I did a couple of times. I like that it's a key part of the game. Those commodities are shared. The fate, the potions.
There's tools, campfires for you to take the rest action.
All those are shared.
Yeah, and they are finite. Fate is the unique one of all of those tokens that you have as a group that is replenishable each round. You use any of the other tokens, they are gone, and the only way to get them back is to spend the gold that you find in the dungeon. Once you are finished with that particular dungeon, then you can spend that money to replenish a token or whatever else you want to purchase. Fate is one of those unique ones that you can constantly be replenishing round over round and be using constantly, and balance how much fate you had and how much you're using.
And I like the potion and the campfires, that it was finite. Do we just use this? It works great for me, but as a group, if we deplete that, we got to spend money. Do we have enough money to buy it? Or do we want to spend that money to upgrade these cards that we found, the treasure that we found? Simple but complex decision-making, Bardsung does it very well.
You brought up treasure, and I think that's a great segue to talk about how you find the treasure with coins and all that good stuff.
And epic stories to tell.
Epic stories to tell.
Just ask Sean Connery, he knows.
That's right. You mentioned, Doug, in your introduction, you start with just 1 tile on the board. You know what you are trying to do is go north. Once you cross the opposite edge of the map, you find the stairs. If you all make it up the stairs, then you succeed in the dungeon. But in the middle, every time you explore a new tile, so on that opening tile, you get to an edge, you take an explore action, you are going to flip over a card that tells you what hallway or what type of hallway to pull out of the stack of tiles. It'll also tell you there are any monsters there, and the board is going to be built by that exploration. But when you initially set up, you're going to see if there's a treasure chest on the map. There's 4 different locations that it can be, and you put them there on this great big square map that sits on the table. That's going to help you decide, okay, you know what, we really are hoping that we get a hallway that's going to go east because we know there's a treasure chest just to the east. You draw your tile and you can orient it whichever way you want as long as the doors match up in the right places. And then once you get to the edge of that hallway and take an explore action, you're going to draw a card for a room. And you just alternate between room and hallway every time you explore.
I absolutely love how these dungeons are procedurally generated. You're not looking to an app to lay it out for you. You don't have to reference a rule book for a map. You flip a card and you line up the dungeon according to the doors, like you said. And every single time you make it through that dungeon, it's going to be different. I love that. That procedurally generated dungeon creation is fantastic.
And I like the dungeon area was actually so small. These scenarios, I keep coming back to Shadows of Brimstone, but you run into Shadows of Brimstone where that just map keeps expanding, where in Bardsung, you're a limited distance that you have to traverse, and you have to get from one side of the map to the other. And that's one of the downsides that I see to the game. The map that we use doesn't have a real clear border that you're trying to dictate. So we got to go from this edge of the map to this edge of the map. There's 3 lines there on each end. Some of them are faded. The lining in the game, I guess, is my biggest beef. This is just one of the examples. The scenario ends once we cross the threshold on the other side. If those tiles shift, it's just like, oh, are we really over? Are we not over? For me, the dungeon area needed a clear, defined line.
Yeah, I would agree. You could always say, when in doubt, just explore another tile. Make sure there's no doubt you crossed the line.
Or if you're done and you found the treasure and you're close enough, it's like, hey, let's end it there. We're good. I could see that kind of going both ways.
Right. If you're going to explore a room, you're more likely to encounter monsters and enemies. Whereas a corridor, sometimes, but sometimes not, you may have story card, an encounter card that's something that's going to have to make a choice on, or something to that effect. Speaking of the tiles, the artwork on the tiles is amazing. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more variety of the artwork. A lot of them are duplicate tiles. I would have liked to have seen a little bit of variation, but the artwork's great. I know this is one thing that we had a difficult time with, and this is one of the things that Nathan really didn't like. The tiles are separated into zones, but those zones it's using the artwork to determine the borders of those zones, and sometimes it's not super clear. The cards themselves, flip over to see which tile to place. It will show you how everything's divided. When you're actually looking at the tile, it's sometimes not very obvious as to where the zone starts, where it ends, how many zones there are, especially when you're trying to move around or spawn monsters and put them in the correct zones. It can be a little bit difficult and tricky to do when it's not obvious on the actual tile.
And you really need to know where those spaces start and stop, because all of your movement for enemies and for players is based on moving from space to space. And that was something that I found a little bit frustrating too. I kept having to reference the card to make sure that I understood where the lines were. That was definitely a nitpick. That was definitely, I think, a mark against it. But man, I loved this game. It's one of those things that I almost don't even want to bring up, because I don't want anybody listening out there to be like, I don't want that to turn them off of playing this game, because it was so good. It's kind of a minor thing, but I do wish that they had put some clearer lines maybe on the tiles and left it to more than just the artwork to determine where those spaces start and stop.
But not with a Sharpie.
Yeah, I tried to do that with a Sharpie. Andy said, no, go buy your own game. I felt if you're going to divide those cards into zones, that breakdown needs to be very clear. I really enjoyed my experience. I'm looking forward to playing it in the future.
The great thing about this part of our discussion is the fact that this little nitpicky thing that you said, and I think we all kind of felt it, is like the one thing that we can look at and go, well, everything else was just awesome.
There's actually 2 things, Dave. I have another nitpick, but it is once again a very slight nitpick, and that is if you're going to design a box and trays for your cards, design it so people can sleeve their cards. It drives me crazy when you want to sleeve your cards, but nothing fits once you sleeve your cards. Like I had to get an external card box for all the cards in the game because they will not fit in the game box now because I sleeved them. Like Dave mentioned, you have individual trays for your cards, all your abilities. You put your player cards in there, and the small cards that are sleeved fit into a slot, and they don't fit in the slot if they're sleeved. They fit in the slot perfectly if they're not sleeved.
Yeah, it's so aggravating.
As the hobby grows, the understanding that players sleeve cards is out there. This isn't a surprise to some game designer that, oh, somebody's going to want to sleeve their cards? Because so many Kickstarters include customized sleeves. You're spot on, Andy. If you're going to create an insert that is perfect for the cards, should account for sleeves.
At least on the bright side, they didn't offer customized sleeves and then still not have them fit, because I've had that happen to me before too. That's just a nitpick. It doesn't affect the gameplay at all. It's just a storage nitpick on my part. It's an extra box that I lug around. The game is huge. There's lots of boxes anyway, so one extra box, you just have someone else carry it for you. With all the Kickstarter stuff, the 3D terrain, expansions, the main game, the box is massive.
This game is definitely worth carrying a bunch of boxes for.
Still, it's just one more box. I mean, if you're going to do a Kickstarter, there's been games that have come out, Terraforming Mars introduced a big box. If someone's going to pay Kickstarter money for a game, yeah, you can say it's just one more box, but ideally, we would still love to have one box.
For the Kickstarter money, offer a storage solution that works. Please.
100% yes.
One of the things that I also really enjoyed is that they partnered up with Foreteller. I love the work that Foreteller does, an app that you can download on phone, tablet, browser. It's kind of a third-party product, but they have partnered with various games, and they record all of the narration and dialogue that's found in the book. I thought that that was really high quality too. And it offered the opportunity for us as we were playing the game, while we're looking at cards and shuffling and going through the cleanup and leveling up process, we could throw the phone down, press play, and have the narrator read the story and kind of move us into the next chapter and what was going on. Really like that as well.
I've loved Foreteller with Gloomhaven, Jaws of the Lion. I've used it for several of the games that they have on there. For something that has a lot of dialogue, having something that's going to read that narration, totally think every game should have that.
Everything that I own that is on the Foreteller app, I've purchased because 100% worth it. The level of immersion you get from the narration, talked about this like with my father's work, getting bogged down in reading stuff. Having that narration is huge. Totally worth the extra money. Now with Bardsung, it was included in the Kickstarter. I don't know if that's going to be the case for retail. Probably not, but I don't know. Even if it wasn't, I would still have probably paid the money for the narration.
Yeah, it's money well spent.
Absolutely.
And it's not Kickstarter exclusive. So if you get this without that bundled together, you can still always just go and buy Foreteller content, and I love that as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you chose your character, you set up the map, you explored the dungeon, you were victorious. Now you're between missions, you were awarded 3 experience points, and you get to spend those to develop your character. We talked quite a bit about the fact that they did this really well. So many different directions you can go. Let's dive in a little bit. You have your 6 basic attributes: strength, dex, con, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Depending on the character, you had one that started at a +1 and one that started at a +2. You can, instead of upgrading abilities, you can choose to spend your experience points to upgrade your basic stats, your basic abilities. And it's a very simple system. If you're going to go to a +1, it costs you 1 experience point. If you're going to go to a +2, it costs 2. If you're going to take your +2 to a +3, you're going to have to spend all 3 of those experience points you just gained to get a +3. I love when you can just increase your basic stats. It's going to be easier for you to pass your skill rolls, your attack rolls, and things like that. But then where it just blows the doors wide open with plenty of opportunity is when you're actually going to do those abilities. You can either upgrade your starting abilities, or you have the opportunity to look through tons of other abilities that you can learn new. Learning a new ability that's of your same class is just going to take 3 experience points. In our most recent play, I'm playing Fate Song as my character, and it's the Bard. And they're kind of color coordinated too. So the Bard, there's usually 2 characters that go with each color. And then there are tons of different abilities in that colored deck for those characters to choose. So I can spend 3 experience points to gain a new ability from those. Or I can go, you know what? I want to go to the green deck because there's some cool stuff in there. Or I loved my Fire Soul and I want to get some of those spells that I was able to get with her. So I'm going to go over to that one. If I want to go out of my class, so to speak, then it's going to cost me 4 experience instead of 3 to get that new one. But there is just so many different things that you can do here. It's awesome.
So yeah, the only restriction to that is a few of the skills, and there aren't very many, will have a actual picture of a hero on that skill card, which means only that hero can take that particular skill. Otherwise, you're not restricted on any skill. Like you said, Dave, the doors are wide open on whether you want a new skill, you want to upgrade your existing skills, flip the card over to the upgraded side, whether you want to upgrade your attributes. It's awesome. And your weapons that you start with, that's one thing you can't upgrade. but the game will actually upgrade those as you progress through the campaign. Thematically, it's the power of the forge as you're diving into the dungeons, your weapons become imbued and start absorbing that power, which they eventually begin to upgrade. In that way, it's actually a little different than a lot of the dungeon crawlers that we've played, where you're getting weapons and you're getting loot and all this different stuff. It's more focused on gaining skills. The treasure cards a lot of them are consumables. It's a one-time use in the dungeon, and you got to pay to refill that to get the use back for it. But as far as weapons go, that really isn't an integral part, at least at the beginning. You end up getting your weapons upgraded, but it just takes time and play. One thing we didn't talk about were actually kind of the gameplay itself. We've talked a lot about the customization. Just real quick, because we're running out of time, but you have 2 actions on your turn. You can move, you can explore, or you can attack. You can do the same action twice if you so choose. When you attack, and I think this is so great, when you look at the monster card, the monsters are going to have a target number up in the top corner, and when you attack them, you have to roll equal to or greater than that number. And when they attack you, when you roll defense, you also have to roll equal to or greater than that number. Talk about simplifying everything. That's what you have to roll for defense. That's what you have to roll for offense. That is their target number for that particular monster. Every monster has 2 health. Once again, very much simplifies the game. If you do 2 damage, it's either going to kill the monster or trigger an effect which will, in essence, flip the monster card over to the other side. And then their abilities will change. Sometimes they will get weaker. Sometimes they'll get stronger. Sometimes it's a combination of the 2. The benefit of that is if there are multiple monsters of the same type would need to be flipped, once you flip that card is flipped for all the monsters on the board. We fought a lot of the brutes, and the brutes were one of those monsters that has the card flip ability, right? Their starting ability on the starting side was terrible. So we definitely wanted to get that flipped, because as soon as you flip that card, that battle became substantially easier, and it was so much easier to kill things. I like the fact that they add the level of complexity into it with abilities on the cards without having to add a ton of health. You just need to do 2 damage. You're either going to flip the card or kill the monster. So well done, so unique. You don't have to deal out a ton of damage, which I think is also nice, because it seems like in a lot of the dungeon crawl type of games, certain characters you can wail on things with a ton of damage. In this, there's no real reason to be doing a ton of damage. 2 damage is all you need. I love that fact, and I love how simple, streamlined they made all of that.
Yeah, it really reduces the amount of upkeep needed as you're progressing through the dungeon. We've all played dungeon crawl games where the enemy upkeep as you're going is so complicated that it just slows the pace of the game down to a crawl. This doesn't have that problem at all. Keeps it simple, straightforward, and you just go.
I like that with this game. It is simple. You shuffle up those cards. The monsters come up when they come up. Sometimes the monsters are going to act twice before you, or even 3 times before you if something happened and that monster was shoved to the end of the line. And then in the next round, you're at the end of the line. So that monster has acted 3 times in front of you. That could be devastating to somebody if they got attacked by the same monster 3 times before they had a turn.
You're talking about the marching order. And this is one of the things that I love most about this game. Turn order is just very unique. Each of the heroes and each of the different monster types is represented by a card. Every round, you shuffle up those cards, randomly arrange them from first to last. And that's the marching order. That's the turn order or the initiative order of the round. You get to see the order in which everybody's going to be attacking. And I like that. A lot of the games that we play, we get to choose our turn order, which I love. But then it's just we go, then a monster goes, then we go, then a monster goes. I like that this adds some variation to that. Sometimes, like you said, Nate, it can be devastating. Other times, we're like, oh, good. We get to all go first.
They have a targeting priority depending on the monster and how they're going to behave. You actually have behavior cards for each of those monsters. If someone walks into that room and they're just going to attack the closest hero that they can attack, a lot of times that is the same hero that everyone's attacking that round. Like Nathan said, if multiple monster cards before anybody else acts. I mean, we ran into that last time. We ended up having to drink a potion because someone got killed or lost all their health, and we had to bring them back. You want to hold on to those items until you have a critical situation where you actually need them. It makes it so there's at least a level of randomness to it. You have to strategize each round differently based on how that initiative order comes out. You can't just say, okay, for next round, we're going to do this and this and this. It's, oh, next round, Next round, who knows? We'll see what the initiative order says, and that may throw everything that we want to do completely off, and we have to change our plans. Typically don't like a lot of randomness in games, but I think that level of randomness where you have to reorient yourselves at the beginning of every single round by just how those cards get laid out is great.
The only part about the marching order that I can see being a potential negative, and I'm not going to say this as a complaint, I'm not even going to call it a nitpick because I haven't played it enough to know for sure. But one thing about how that marching order works is that you're going to lay all your cards out. If somebody kicks open a door that has monsters in it, you don't finish the marching order. You immediately stop, you shuffle in the monster cards, and then you start over from there. Potentially, what can happen, and again, this is all just randomness, this is all part of the procedurally generated nature of the game, but what could happen is if you're at the end of that marching order, you don't get to go that round. Monster cards get shuffled in, and then if you're at the end of that marching order again, or even if you're at the beginning, you're essentially using that round to catch up to the group or to do what you would have done in the first round. I think that can bite you, but that's kind of part of the random fun of the game. And those rounds go so fast that it's not like you're sitting there for a huge period of time with nothing to do.
And on top of that, I think one of the things that I like about it, theoretical problem that you could run into that way, is if we were all down in a dungeon and I'm the slowest one to go this round, and Andy has the bright idea to open up a door while we're already fighting a bunch of monsters, it's going to be chaos. Who knows what's going to happen? I like that part of it. As far as gameplay goes, it could kind of stink to be that guy who is the last in the round, and then we have to reshuffle and redeal all those marching order cards, and then I'm still last and don't get a turn for 2 full rounds, essentially.
Dave's talking from experience, by the way.
Well, so am I. That one game that we played, that did happen to me. That game, that mission, I think it lasted maybe 30 minutes, and that portion 5-10 minutes, it really wasn't bad.
Going back to just some of those abilities, we talked about how many different abilities there are. And the bard that I'm playing, a lot of the abilities that I can gain with experience are things that manipulate the marching order. They really incorporated all sorts of things into the fun of your characters. Not only can I attack monsters, I'm going to be able to totally rearrange how things are working.
If you can't tell, we are really excited about Bardsung. We love this game. We love a lot that it has to offer. We have all had a good time with it at the table. This is turning into a very long episode, and we're going to wrap it up with final thoughts. Nathan, what do you think?
I think I kind of already summed up my final thoughts. I really liked the game, had a blast with it. My biggest issue is the zones and the lines. Is that going to stop me from playing the game? No way. I'm anxious to play this game again and again and again.
Like I started off the episode saying, I can see this one climbing the ranks of my favorite games really quickly.
I would agree with you guys. It's a great game. Loved the plays that we've had. I want to dive more into the campaigns and get more into that side of it. We've just barely got our feet wet. I want to get more into these campaigns and get a little bit more into the story of it all. See what that Foreteller app has to offer. And whenever we play, keep the Sharpies away from Nathan.
I agree. I echo everything that you're saying. I had a blast playing this game. Can't wait to play it again. I'm more than just excited. I am actively anticipating the next time that we get to get Bardsung to the table. Fantastic game. And that is Bardsung. Until next time.
We'll see you diving into the dungeon and having experiences that are worthy of Bard songs.
As always, we want to thank you for listening.
Check out our website. We have all sorts of cool things there. Love those blogs. Get a deeper look into the writing side of Meeple Nation.
Join our Facebook group, Meeple Nation Off Air. I look forward to seeing you there.
Follow us on Twitter @MeepleNation. We also have Instagram
under the same name. We also want to thank our sponsor, GameToppersLLC.com.
We love their product, and they have so much goodness out there.
And we also want to thank Braiding Detergent for our music.
I'd probably call it good there.
Join us next week as we... Oh, is that not what you meant?